Thank you, Chris. For quite a while now, I've had an interest in timbre, and a couple of years ago that morphed into an interest in sound itself. I came across the notion of the interior of sound, one that many composers had explored in their own ways. For me, the idea of the inherent properties of sound containing a potential richness was fascinating. I became drawn to the idea of listening to sustained sounds, especially in an environment that focused one's attention on the nuances and gradual changes within that sound. The sonorist aesthetic of Italian composer Scelsi was a big influence on this. In his later works, Scelsi approached music from a philosophical understanding of sound, thinking of it as a living object. He focused on what he described as the depth of sound. Influential to his approach was the musical spiritualism of Dane Rudhyar. His philosophy, in particular his notion of the tone as a living cell, encouraged the examination of each note as a living organism that has a unique power, potential, and energy within it. Scelsi was also influenced by Rudolf Steiner's belief that a single note might reveal an inner richness, comparable to the variety of aesthetic experience conveyed by melody. Based on these ideas, Scelsi rejected the axiom of pitch as a primary musical parameter, and thus also the traditional conventions of melody and harmony, turning his attention instead to the inner space of sounds. In many of Scelsi's works, the ensemble create a global sound, centered around a single pitch. For example, the chamber orchestra work Quattro pezzi su una nota sola is comprised of 4 movements that each focus on the timbral transformation of a single pitch. You can see that the ensemble work together to create a single sound around F. You can see the instruments fade in and out. Brass instruments use a variety of mutes as well as open and closed positions. Vibrato comes in. There are various iterations of notes as well as tremolando as well. All of these play a part in bringing life into the sound. So a nice example of Scelsi using the small orchestra to create a single sound that is constantly transforming but sounds like it's just one group. In thinking about all these ideas for my own work, I often found myself musing on what the interior of sound actually is and why that seemed to result in a musical focus on timbre. The way I've come to see it, sound could be described as being made up of pitch, duration, intensity, and timbre. However, these first 3 elements, pitch, duration, and intensity, can also be seen as parameters of timbre, largely due to their ability to affect changes in the presence of partials, perceived as a change in the colour or quality of the sound. So in trying to draw attention to the properties of sound, I found myself focused on timbre as a compositional parameter. In my own work, I wanted to create a very focused musical environment that would draw the listener's attention to timbral nuances. I envisioned a singular sonic entity that very gradually and organically transformed. And I tried to achieve this in Interiors, a work for string quartet. I chose a string quartet because I thought it would be an appropriate medium for this idea. The ability of string instruments to sustain sounds and also create very gradual changes in timbre was important. The instruments also offered a wide variety of timbral variation, more than I was planning to use. And as an ensemble, they create a very cohesive sound, important in creating a singular sonic entity. In order to encourage focused listening to the nuances of sound, I chose to use very limited material, soft dynamics, and a reasonably gradual timbral variations. I also avoided traditional melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic content to also help draw attention to sound itself. The timbral transformations are controlled by pitch and performance technique that also create varying degrees of consonance and dissonance. Pitch is used largely as an element of timbre, creating variation through the use of octave displacement, microtonal inflections, gradual expansion to create a cluster around D natural, and partials from the harmonic series of those notes. I also would gradually add vibrato and trills to widen the harmonic language, but also add subtle movement within the overall sound. Furthermore, the varying presence of partials resulting from different bowing positions was used to affect not only timbre but also levels of tension. I wanted this to be a very linear and organic process, so I chose to use the Fibonacci series to provide a really naturally increasing rate of timbral change. You can see some of my maths here. I took the first 5 numbers of the series, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8, and used them in reverse with a base unit of 25 seconds to create a temporal guide for the rate of change and control of tension. Each section was then also further divided using the Fibonacci series again. Creative license did play a part, I must admit. This became a structural guide rather than a strict system to adhere to. And that was what using the Fibonacci series created structurally, this idea of sections that gradually get smaller, thus the timbral changes happen more quickly. You'll also see from the score there that I chose to use time-space notation to help remove any sense of pulse and create a more organic movement of sound through time. With such a small ensemble, this was reasonably effective and I would use it again. Although something that came up in performance that I didn't expect was the ensemble chose to sense time naturally, which is fine, although their sense of a minute was much shorter than an actual minute. But things are still happening naturally, which is fine. Just to finish, I'd like to play you an extract of Interiors.